Next question is again from Ernesto. Does the NLI constitution enumerate the common law conceptual system into a disambiguated legal / logical framework, thereby outlawing positive law? Would this eliminate the Supreme Court position as the legislators from the bench? I say we go to extreme detail on disambiguation. I don't let Curt get away with assuming any term is understood.
No, he doesn't.
Everything has to be explained. I mean, I would think so. Some things that we've talked about for years that they'd be sorted out. No. Like we've delved deep into reciprocity and had to start defining a lot of things that were assumed.
He doesn't let me get away with anything. He will shoot a hole in it. And so one thing that's funny is that I don't want, it's people who don't shoot holes in you, don't teach you anything. I tease Martin that it feels like his job is to ruin my effing day, but it's actually glorious.
Well, those are not incompatible, are they?
No.
To ruin your day and make your week.
Positive law in the sense of policy is still possible, but as a trait, not as an imposition. That means any positive law has to survive the test of negative, which is natural law.
Correct.
Hey, Francis.
I love our team. Did I just say that out loud in public? Oh well. I love our people.
I think you often do.
We only got the top of his head there. And some sunglasses. All right. So we probably got time for one more.
Is that good enough for that question? I guess.
Yeah. In other words, your second point was that if you see the detail we've done on legitimacy of the law, it's very hard to circumvent that. I'm sure someday there's somebody will invent a way to try to manipulate it, but you can't put a law out there that violates natural law. It's just not able to be done. Will there people try? Of course. Now, here's a trick. Let's say we said debits and credits, right? We can go into debt and pay it back. There are times when you might want to say, I'm going to go into a debt in the middle class to advance the working class. I might be willing to do that, to spend education on them. But why am I doing that? Because it helps me over time, right? So it's like education. Well, education is pretty goddamn useful. I mean, I'm not sure about today's education, but in the past, education was pretty useful. So you're doing something that's bettering for all of you. Go ahead, Moritz. You gonna say something?
Yeah, I think the only way I can see somebody being able to attack it is basically on the civilization scale. And that requires an amount of resource and a level of coordination that is extremely hard to pull off. And so therefore energetically extremely costly, and therefore only open to the largest of players that are well organized. And so without that, you won't get around it.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yes, let me re-emphasize something that's come up a couple of times, and this will be the third time in this session. But the point is, because we're making this easy to do, you don't need approval. You don't need a politician or novelty. You don't need anybody to agree with you. Because you can take something to court, you can catch something early. And that's when it's cheap. So we want to keep it cheap to catch people early. Right? And if we do that, then it's really hard for these grand coalitions to form that actually get away with anything. So it's just it's the equivalent of, why do we have freedom? Because we had spears and shields and bronze, right? Why freedom? Because we had muskets and swords, right? Because we have rifles, right? You need to have everybody armed. It's the same thing in politics, right? You need to, the proxy for courts are the proxy for violence, right? So you need to have everybody is equally empowered in the militia to defend the commons, right? As they are as the militia in the army to defend the commons. And so what we've tried to do is keep this, what he called distributed, Eli called it distributed dictatorship, individual sovereigns. Sorry, what?
Of sovereign man or something, yeah.
Is that we need to restore that so that we can defend it. So just the ability to stop people early, because you know how, I mean, it was too hard to stop people back in the 50s. You need a lot of work, a lot of consensus to do that. We don't need to have consensus to stop people from criminality.
I'd just like to make sure we enumerate some of the mechanisms that
consider that. No, wait. You used to disconnect my.
I'm fine.
Francis, need to mute. I'll mute him.
You can demo it, I think.
I just want to make sure we enumerate some of the mechanisms by which that is actually possible, by which the defense is possible in the legal realm. So one of them is the ability to point to, for example, the purposes of a law as a thing that the law is no longer serving, and therefore coordinate around that purpose and the conditions by which it expires or is no longer actually apt to what the original purpose was. Another thing is what liability, right? Basically, people have an incentive to keep themselves apprised of the actions of their peers, their superiors, and their others below them, so as to maintain their ability to judge whether what they're participating and contributing to stays on the straight and narrow, if you will, with respect to legal liability. What other mechanisms are there?
I don't know if I can follow it on the same path. I would think of it as you can't, who's always saying, I don't like this word, but who's always saying you can't have responsibility without authority? And I think of it, right? And so we're trying to push authority down to every responsible person. There's really, I mean, in my world, the way I simplify everything is that the courts, the legislatures, the federal legislature, it's just a court system, right? And so do we have access to submit a motion to the court system? And we don't. We used to, but we don't. Do you feel like your legislators available to you? Or that your legislature can affect a difference? That's a fucking joke. I mean, look at Bryan. Brandon's involved in this stuff. He knows. It's a joke. If you could get an appointment with them, they won't do anything except, mollify you. It used to be you could go to your legislature and say, I can't have my son go to war. He's supporting the whole family. Right? And he was like, okay, yes, or yeah, sorry, you got 4 boys and one's got to go. You used to be able to do that. You can't get that anymore, and which is the same problem as we used to be able to go to the nobility and do that. Right? We don't have any agency except a vote, and the evidence is the vote's an illusion because they don't enact what policies we want. And it could be that some policies, I mean, basically what our vote does is if it gets really bad, we can vote the bums out. But but what's our other influence? It doesn't happen through us. It happens through special interests. So we got to restore that capacity and the responsibility and the authority. And the authority is basically, I'm saying it as court because that's the model I use in my head. But we don't have the ability to petition for the redress of grievances. I mean, how do you go and petition for redress of grievances? You go and you whine to your mayor or your councilman or whatever. You think that makes any difference? And not unless you can threaten them to get unelected. They're not there to make you or my favorite thing is with the IRS. It used to be the purpose of the IRS was to preserve you first as a going concern. Right? They're trying to make you able to be. Right? You think that's their first purpose today? Is to get a conviction. Right? So it used to be your sheriff was basically pater familiar for your quality. You know, they're like, okay, you know, go talk to the mom and dad first. You know, they just throw you in the fucking system now. So do we have does the system respond to what for us for redress of grievances? No. You know why, of course, is because the 60s introduced all this heterogeneity. So there's no common reason that can be applied. So all the people that used to be able to be responsible for the public, they throw the stuff over the wall of the system because they're actually powerless. So we've tried to restore all that. It's not that, you know, you think it's weird. It's like one of those domino things, right? It's just we got to fix these 6 or 7 dominoes, and it's going to be fine, right? Which is the rich. I can't remember who said it first. Might have been it was Noah. Is that the Constitution is not that far off? I mean, it's an amazing work of cooperative science. Well, at least if you take the Declaration, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Blackstone, and the Federalist Papers, that's a pretty good body. But we need to pack that all up with what we've learned about human behavior, democratic processes, and the problem of scale as economies become more complex. And then we've got to handle the introduction of the lower classes, women, and aliens. Well, Moritz, did I answer that? No, you want to go?
Yes, I just wanted to add 2 more mechanisms for the audience's sake to understand how the Constitution defends itself or allows members of the polity to defend it, which is one that we inscribe into the Constitution. This is work that we just recently did on authority, that we want to make it a requirement, or we will make it a requirement of authority to have a positive duty to educate the people that are their charges in the capacity to keep them accountable and to also replace them. And so that is a mechanism that allows people to be able to judge whether somebody who's exercising authority over them, for whatever reason, is actually acting in their interests and is fulfilling his duty, even if they don't understand the actual factors that are at play in them making specific decisions, because it's now their obligation to educate people about their reasoning. Doesn't mean that they can't make decisions without explaining them first. They can make decisions without explaining them first, but they have to be able to, and they have to be oriented towards educating and training the people underneath them in the capacity to exercise that same responsibility and the same leadership. And so that is a thing that people can point to, even if they don't understand the subject matter or the way that somebody's making decisions, because they can say, you're not taking active steps to help us understand what the factors are at play. You're not taking active steps to have us be trained in the capacity to do your job. Therefore, you are delinquent in your duty to make sure that in your absence or in your falling astray from the path, if you will, that we can exercise that same responsibility. And so I think this is extremely important, because you want to preserve the capacity of people in position of authority to act entrepreneurially without having to account for everything they do to the people that are their charges. You have to have the ability for them to make decisions somewhat arbitrarily without being able to linguistically explain them in the moment that they're making them, and to have the freedom to do so. But you also have to maintain the ability of people below them to judge whether these people are doing their job. And the only way you can marry those 2 things together, to my knowledge at the moment, is to make it a part of their duty to educate continuously the people underneath them in the capacity.
We see this, you see this very distinctly. I've spent a lot of time in courtrooms. So, but as there's some of this new things that are coming out in the televised court, is some judges educate and some judges just rule and throw away. The person isn't better off. They don't understand. And neither does the jury or the audience. Whereas what a judge should be doing is, here's my understanding. The jury's made this. I mean, most of this stuff is we don't educate people enough in the law so that they can understand what it actually does versus what they think it does. Right? And so some of this judge is like, you really screwed this up, and you're not repentant on it. And what we're looking for is why you repent. Then they tell them. Right? Other judges will say, okay, well, you probably should in the future do something like this. And if you can tell me I'm not going to see you in my courtroom again, I'll reduce it to this. So you tell me you're going to do that again. And that's like, yes. But, you forget the judges remember, they got records, right? They know. They've been sitting with their the clerk, before they showed up for the court in the morning, going over what they're going to go through, right? And this guy's you made this guy promise he's not going to be here again, and he's here. Well, the judge is going to kick your ass now. That's being a parent. That's not throwing you into the system, right? We want those people to be nobility, to make the judgments you're talking about, and especially in the sense of, can I teach you? Which is what you're emphasizing the role of teaching the population, and I think what we've done with education is we've made this part of the education system. We've made teaching natural law part of the education system. All right, how many did we get through today? Not many.
A third.
And I would just like to add the last one. We don't have to go into a big thing about that, but just the concept of inalienation. I don't think that people understand what that means, and I don't think they're used to that frame. Like, we have already the understanding of rights and duties or obligations, and now we're adding inalienations. And inalienation basically means you have a positive duty to do something when you encounter a departure from something. No?
A positive duty is an obligation. And a good example of inalienation is the one that's most contentious, is the right to bear arms. That's inalienable. In other words, no one can take that away from you, right? The government can't take that away from you, right? But you can't abandon it either.
That's what I mean. That is the duty part of it.
No, that's the inalienable part of it, right? The duty is to use it for something, but it's an inalienable.
Right.
The inalienable part is neither can you be deprived of it, nor can you abandon it. So if you won't bear arms, you're guilty, right? If you try to escape the bearing, so arms is a good one because people are passionate about it. But you can make that about any given right or obligation. Is it inalienable or inalienable? Well, if it's a natural right, it's inalienable. In other words, nobody can take it from you, and you can't escape it. So the right, obligation, and alienation, if you tell the truth, right? You can't escape it. The right, obligation, and alienation is to reciprocally ensure everyone else's sovereignty, right, and demonstrated interest. That's inalienable. You can't get yourself out of it either. So it's not only that the government can't take away from you, but you can't escape that either. And so, in other words, the real reason for that is to stop you or me or everyone from trying to petition the government to get out of something that's a fundamental obligation.
Right. Can you just briefly identify how it is inalienable? Are you saying it's existentially inalienable, or is it saying that the Constitution is making it inalienable by basically giving you consequence for not?
That. Well, I mean, a natural right is inalienable because it's not possible to maintain natural law without it.
But this is the thing, only if others hold that same value and come to a defense of it.
Correct.
Yeah, but then the obligation part of it is inalienable.
I don't understand that statement.
Yeah, if you must bear arms, that's an obligation. That's what you're not allowed to alienate from yourself. Yes.
Right, but from yourself. Okay, so what you're saying is, well, Curt, just describe it as this way. No one can deprive you of the right, and you may not deprive yourself of the obligation. Is that the way? Okay, that would make sense.
Right, and I'm just adding that this requires other members to themselves also be oriented this way and to value that, or to be otherwise forced to enact that.
Right. So, Lon, let's talk about the difference between a right and a preference. Right. So, most legislation is not about rights; it's about a preference, a privilege.
No, but privilege. Yeah.
Right. So, are privileges inalienable? No. They're not. The whole point of inalienable means we can't have natural law with sovereignty, self-determination, sovereignty, and demonstrated interest, reciprocity, and display word for indeed, truth, duty, excellence, and beauty. We can't have those if you try to get out of these rules, because these are the minimum rules necessary to ensure those things for yourself and others. And so, if somebody gets out, tries to get out of it, it's punishable. It's why we would make the Second Amendment nonsense go away. And in essence, the First Amendment, the first right is the right to bear arms. Because every other right's dependent on it. I'm watching you, Moritz. I feel like I'm watching your eyes.
This is great. I just have had an internal thought that I'm just probably going to go through all of the website's content and the Constitution and invert your fundamental frame, which is to hedge against the limit case or the extremes, and invert that and then go for the positive. And basically, like, okay, what is the baiting into benefit that has to happen here for people to join this rather than how do we guard against the abuse or attack and so on?
You better take notes when you fucking do that so we can add that in. Because it would be great to have a positiva
Well,
for all
maybe
the
we
negative.
don't want to bait some people to join. Maybe we want them to go away.
All right,
That, by the way, I want to tell you, Moritz, that was a very smart thing to say. Thank you. All right, so we've gone over by. Oh, actually, no, we're about 2 hours in, right? All right. So are we ready to close up? Yes. Anybody else? No.